3. Okay.
Welcome everyone, Baruch haba, to our class on Der Tfunos. We're discussing chapter 11, and hopefully we'll be able to conclude our discussion and then be able to do some applications in the coming weeks. As is our custom, we just do a quick review to get us located in the Sefer. The Ramchal Sefer is divided into three basic sections, even though there's 4 sections here, but there are three basic ones. The first section, he tells us about how to understand Sugis in the Gemara. The second one, he's going to tell us about, or he told us about, all the different aspects of subjects when you want to analyze an item and you want to make sure that you've covered all your bases. He said that nosim subjects have various aspects, and it's very important to know or to have a checklist of those various aspects so that you can go through that checklist and make sure that you've covered your topic completely. And then it's a question of presentation. And presentation, these two parts are important. You have to know that there's certain things that logically precede other things, and then you have to be able to masader your presentation. So that's basically the Ramchal setup. Let's go into the Sefer and see where we're holding in chapter 10. Okay. Excuse me, chapter 11, not chapter 10. Okay. Okay, just 1 second. I'm sorry, that wasn't prepared. I was doing some other things. This is all stuff that we did last week. And this is where we are now. Okay. So the Ramchal tells us the following. Now he's going to explain to us how to present information after we've analyzed our topic through the process, the Gemara process. We're interested in learning Gemara. And then we've made sure that we've understood all the various aspects. Now we want to present our information. So he says that in order to present, we need three different aspects. One, Sidur, the other one, Gedarim, definition, and the third one is going to be distinctions, the Chilukim. So let's see what he says here. Uma shiozeh haskala eiz hagadol uma kelo et hatorach hu haseder. Something that helps the mind do its research and understand things is seder. V'zeh ben lilmod or ben lamed. That's whether you're trying to learn or whether you're trying to teach someone. Ki b'zeh misalek es hamasil lefnei haseichel shiachol leches b'dachis bonus b'lim neksholos. That'll clear the path for us and remove any obstacles in our way of investigation. The im lomatu, if he's trying to teach, to learn, I'm sorry, Yasik Hamaskuos Shehu Mebakesh Alanachon, he'll be able to get the concepts correctly. The im Melamed, who, if he wants to teach, Ba Masha Badato Lavar, Ber Maspik Viakal El Ha Lomed Mimenu Asig Ma Shilamdehu. And if he's teaching, so then he'll be able to communicate the ideas in his mind that in a very clear way, in a sufficient way, and it will make it easier for the person who was trying to learn from him to conceive what the teacher is trying to broadcast. So what does this is, he explains, Hikariya Seder Shlosha. There's three parts of, or three divisions of Seder. One is called Sidur, organization. One is called Gedarim, definitions. The third one is called Chiluk, which is divisions. And as it's the Ramchal's way, he first gives you the three general boxes, and then he explains each one in particular. What is Sidur? Sidur, who Sidur Hayanim Mashru'ui Lios B'Techila Sam Mashru'ui Lios Achar Kach. Sidur is the proper organization of your material so that the things which logically should come first are presented first, and the things which logically follow should follow after those things. V'hinei hasidur hanaos hu is halech tamid min ha'inyanim hakodmin el mucharim miha yoter nodim el ha'nelamim yoter. He says the proper way to present information is always to go from those things which come first logically to those things which follow logically, and those things which are more clearly known to those things which are less clearly known. Perish, he's going to explain that. Hakolalim hem tamid kodmin. Categorical things, categories are always first. V'yoter nodim mehapratim, and they're always more known than the particulars. The Peshutim, simple things, are yoter nodim mehamakavim, are more known than the complex things. Now he's going to spell that out. Derech mashal. B'chochma hadiktuk. Let's say we're trying to teach someone grammar. Hine mashabui shiadaber techilo hu be'inyan osios. So the codeman, the first thing you should talk about are letters. Achar kach ala tevus v'nikudos. Then you should talk about words and the nikudos, the proper cantillation of those words, or validation of those words, better word. Achar kach al chelkei adibur. Then you have to talk about the various parts of speech, nouns, verbs, and milos. I suppose that means vocabulary. Achar kach al chibur mamrim elu and elu. Then you have to talk about, once you now understand the letters, words, nikudos, what the actions of the words are. Then you have to talk about statements. How do you build statements? So there we went from the things which are naturally precedent, the letters, all the way up to the list in the logical order to sentences. Now he's going to tell us an interesting concept, that there's two types of wisdom. Lahain hasechlius, there's things which are intellectual, just exist in the intellectual world. And the other one is called maisios, crafts, things that you actually have to do. Hasechlius ma she'inyanim yedias mada echad. Sechlius is when you want to know one type of science, and he'll spell these things out. The ma'asiot is ma she'inyanan yedias maloch echas. Ma'asiot means when you want to know how to do something, a certain craft. Derech mashal. Now it's going to spell that out to us. Let's say we're talking about astronomy. So that's, in order to understand the heavens, you have to know all the orbits and the planets and how they operate. The Chachmas Hadiktuk ki yedias Maisa. So that's what he calls knowing sechlis. There's nothing you're going to do. It's just an interesting subject knowing how the planets relate to each other. There's nothing that you're going to do with it except understand an intellectual study. Chacham Sadiktuk, however, he yedias ma'isa hadibo hamitukan. But when we talk about the wisdom of grammar, that's in order to know how to speak properly. Chacham hatachuna tikra sechlis she'en bo ela haskalas echad min ha'inyanim shebemetzias kamoshu bo. The astronomy is called an intellectual study because all it is an understanding of the reality of some part of the universe. But the Chochmas Hadiktuk, that's called Ma'asit. That's called something that you want to do. Shahari Tachliso Hi Lelamed Eich Ra'ui Shia Dubar Baloshen. It's going to teach you how to actually speak a language. So one is an activity and action, and one is purely an intellectual pursuit. I suppose mathematics would be another example of something that's just sichlius completely. Although it does have a relationship to reality, but the studying of itself in mathematics, algebra, these things are seichel that you're not trying to do an activity. V'ulam, so he says there's different types of ways of presentation, presenting those two different types of materials. V'ulam haseda ha'ra'ui b'limud ha'sichliim hu, here's the way you're supposed to present intellectual study. First, techilas hakol yedias hanosei shalav naso. First you have to define the subject that you're dealing with. V'achar kach yedias chalakav. Then you take your subject and you divide it into its parts. Then you explain why the things are, what the causes of each one of those different parts are. Then you have to explain all the different subdivisions and details in those subcategories. First you should say your generalities, and then you have to get into all the pratim. First you should talk about the simple things and the simple units, the atoms, and then you talk about how those things combine together. However, when you try to teach someone something to do, there, techilas hakol is yedias hatachlis, asher nirtzeh lahasik. There you have to talk about what is the goal of the study. That's what you should talk about first. Since you want to teach someone what to do, so you have to tell them, well, what are we going to learn? What is our goal in this study? What are we trying to achieve? The tachlis. Then you have to explain to them what are the means to get to that goal. Then you have to explain the means that you're going to use to get to that goal according to the various levels. Derech mashal. Okay, that's a sichli thing. I'm sorry, you want to teach someone how to actually do the calendar. That's what you want to do, I'm sorry. It's not just trying to learn the rules of the calendar. You want to actually teach someone how to make a calendar, a Jewish calendar. You have to say, what is the tachlis first? It's to make sure that the first of the lunar month happens in the proper time. That's what we're trying to do. So once we spoke about the tachlis, which is to make sure that Rosh Chodesh comes out properly, then we have to tell you about all the means to get to that tachlis. What are they? You have to teach people about months which are full months, months which are missing the days. And then after months, you have to talk about the shanim, the years, hasiduros, chaseros, vashlemos, the ones that have 12 months and 13 months, filled and not filled. Inyan hapeshutim, muborim. Then you have to talk about the simple years and when we have leap years. Cheshbon hamalodos, years hadechios. You have to know about all how to make the cheshbon of when the moon is in the right position. That's what you do when you're teaching someone a craft. Now here, I took Mesilas Yesharim, okay? And I just wanted to show you that he's true to his goals. The reason why the class started off in the beginning of our book is I also wanted to show it there. But here in Mesilas Yesharim, he says the Yisod Chasidus Shor Shabbat Tamima He Shisbar V'Yitzamesal Kol Adam Machol B'Sol B'Olamo. The first thing he says in Mesilas Yesharim is that you have to understand your tachlis in the world. Uloma Shetzor Shesim Abato Megamato B'Kol Asher Hu Omal Kol Yemei Chayav. And what you're supposed to visualize as your purpose and your goal and your work for all the days of your life. So the first thing he says, the first thing we have to do if you want to be, if you understand, if you want to be a chassid, is to understand what your goal is, what your tachlis is. And here it is. V'hinei, ma'ashavun v'chachmeim v'zichron ha'bracha hu she'adam lo nivra elo l'saneg al Hashem la'anot v'zishchinto. That's the great chiddush of the Ramchal. This is the goal of your creation. Hey, this is why we were created. Quite amazingly, we were created to lahanot, to get pleasure from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's what he says. Lahanot al Hashem, get pleasure from Hashem and from the radiance of His Shekhinah. So that's the goal. The goal is to receive pleasure from Hashem. It says in the Mesilas Yesharim. And he tells us V'zehu tanig amiti va'idun gadol b'kol idonim shecholim lemotzei. He also tells us the greatest pleasure that anyone can get is this pleasure that one gets from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Okay, that's it. Now he says, how do we get there?
Ask a question?
Yeah, please.
I'm not quite sure what is the chilek between the two, and why does there have to be a chilek?
Okay.
Or we're going to get into that later.
Okay. Let me first give this example, and then I'll try to get back to that. Okay.
Okay.
All right. I just want to show you the example in his own book, Mesilas Yesharim, which is the goal is here, and then the means. Okay. So he says like this: Malcolm Eden Nazeh. Nasan, if you could just lower that speaker a little. I put my earphones on so I don't get the feedback. Thank you. Now he says the place where that pleasure will be Olam Haba, because that's the place where we have all the means to appreciate Kodesh Baruch Hu. Now what are so that's the goal. The goal is L'saneg al Hashem, the place is Olam Haba, and the derech la'agia el mechos chosenu zehu olam hazeh, but the path to get to that place is this world. V'hu ma she'omer tzichnam lebracha ha'olam is dom lepros do lifnei olam haba. This world is like a entrance hall before the next world. Now, here's the emseim that we have to know. First he said you have to explain what the goal is, and he explained what the place was because you have to know the place of Olam Haba. And he says the emseim hamagiyim et ha'adam b'tachlis hazeh. If you want to get that tachlis, hem hamitzvos asher tzivur aleihem Hashem yisbarach shemo. So the means now is the mitzvahs that we do. Okay. So what you have to do when you teach a person an activity that he's supposed to be doing, in this case, what are our actions directed at in this world? So you start off by telling him what his goal is. Then you have to tell him what the means to attain that goal. Okay. Then you have to tell him all the pratim. So at the end of that little introduction, he says, Hine acher shiadanu yisbar etzleinu emitis haklal hazeh. We have to understand that our goal is clear to us. Yesh l'chakor al pratav lefi madrugehem. So then I have to explain to you all the details that go in to doing those mitzvahs, which are the emsim to get to Olam Haba, mitchilas dabulat sofo. Kamo shid sigram Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair, and then he uses Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair. He say Yom Ma'amar Shalo Shavinu Kvam Navasenu Vehem, as Zehiris, Rizos, Nakios, Precious, Taharas, Chasidus, Anava, Yiris, Chet, Kedusha, Batana, Kolech Vercha, Tesiat Shmai. So then he explained everyone according to his Madrega. So once you understand the Derek Funos, the Ramchal is very true to his system. And he spells it out. He says, look, I want to teach someone what to do, teach them the goal, and then the means. Okay? Now, to get back to Nussen's question, when you're learning mathematics, there's no goal and means. There's just subject matter called math. So now you're going to have to know numbers, and you have to know addition and subtraction, okay, multiplication and division. And you keep going on, but there's no goal that you want. It's not an action that you want to reach. It's an intellectual activity that you want to gain. So in that case, you should really explain what the subject matter is about, and then go from the simple items like he said in Dicto, start with. Let's teach the I'm mixing up the two things, I'm sorry. When he said Kriya Sachodesh, for instance, you go from the days to the months to the years and so on. But I think the point being is that you're not, when you're trying to get to a goal, you have to know what your goal is and what your means to that goal are. When you're trying to learn, a intellectual concept or subject matter, like say I'm learning history. History has no goal to it. It's not like I want to get somewhere. It's a subject, the history of the Jewish people. It's a subject. It has its parts, its errors, and its notable characters. But it doesn't have. I'm not using it to attain a goal. So that's why my presentation is different. I don't talk about my goal because there is no goal. The goal is just to understand the subjects. I have to define my subject. This is what we're talking about, the history of the Jewish people from the time of the creation of the world till getting into, right before we get into Eretz Yisrael. That'll be our goal. And then we'll talk about these various periods in that. There's before the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach, there's the receiving the Torah, etc., etc. Okay, I hope I made myself clear. Nosson, is that more or less clear? The difference between two things. One is goal-oriented, and one is a subject matter that has to be analyzed into its kolam and its pratim.
I guess we'll see how this relates. I guess we'll see how this relates to learning Gemara, because there are probably parts of learning Gemara which are just sechlius, and then there are parts of it which are for Maisius. Is that correct? Or it's all Maisius?
Well, that's a big question. That's a big field of learning Gemara. How is it presented? Well, he's going to bring an example of Shabbos, for instance.
Okay.
Now, is Shabbos a Maisa or is it a Sichli? Well, on one hand, you're supposed to be doing Shabbos. Your goal is to do Shabbos. On the other hand, it has its parts. Let's read what he says, and let's see if we get back to that question. Okay. All right. When you're presenting, you have to be very careful in the following thing when you're presenting material in an orderly way. Shalot taskir inyanim chutz l'mekomam u'madresam. Make sure that you're not going to mention things out of place or out of their appropriate level. V'hainu, what does that mean? Shalot seba'er amiyucha lefnei. So make sure you don't explain things which rightfully or logically come later first. Because people won't understand what you're saying because you didn't explain your premises before you. And that's why really when he starts, he talks about statements first, then he talks about syllogisms, because syllogisms are based on statements. If you talk about syllogisms first and then go back to statements, it confuses the mind. If I don't teach you about statements before syllogisms, so then you're missing information that you should have had. So that's rule number one. Make sure that you don't place things in the wrong order. Like, say with syllogism, talk syllogism first and statements second. Should be the opposite way. Oshalo taskir dava asher lo ba'arti is another very important thing. Never mention something that you've explained. Kize yivabel das hashomea umania me'asi ma shitlamdehu, because it's going to confuse the person who's listening to you and prevent him from understanding learning what you have to teach. What should you do? But if it's mukhrach that you must bring a concept or a term in that you have not explained previously, immediately after you say this new concept, say, don't worry about it, this concept will be explained further. It'll quiet the mind of the person who's listening, because he won't be wandering around trying to, well, wait a minute, what does that word mean? What is that concept? Okay? You'll say, okay, I'm going to explain that in a little while. I just want to introduce the concept, and I'll explain it a little second. Derech Mashal, for example, if you want to explain how to set Rosh Chodesh, as I mentioned above. So, Inyanim, Hashanim, Hasiduros, Chaseros, Hashlemos, Kodem Inyan HaChadoshim, HaChaserim, V'Amaleim, Hine Zeh Chesron Seder. To explain first the years, what's called a full year, what's called a non-full year, what has 13 months, what has 12, before you explain what's called a full month and what's called a non-full month, how many days of the full month is not, that's called a Chesron and Seder. Ki'inyan hasiduras v'chaseras v'hashlemas talui b'inyan ha'chesron ha'chadoshim u'maluyam. Because the years, whether a year is full or not, 13 months, 12 months, depends upon how you set the months. And there's no way to explain how the years are going to be 12 and 13, long and short, without first explaining how the months go. So that would be a chesron in Seder. Or as I mentioned, you can't explain Hekeshin before you explain Mamarim. Okay? You can't explain proofs, how to bring a proof from a Hekesh before you explain a Hekesh. So you have to be very careful that you explain things from the simple to the complex in the proper Madrega. So that's his little exposition on Seder. What about Gedarim? Definitions. Hu shetisponen ma'od b'chol inyanim shetaskir ligdoro sam lamitam begeder sholem shichla kol ikinyanam ad shitzuya tziyuram heitev b'das tremeya. Let's stop there. You have to have very clear definitions. As the Ramchal, you see how he does in the Sefer all the time. He has very short, clear definitions. You have to misbon and mailed the kol yamin v'taski. You have to really think about things and remember ligdor asam lamitam. You have to define them truly. What does that mean? Begeder sholem, in a complete way. Shichlo kol ikin yanam. You have to talk about the essential definition of the thing. If you're talking about statements, you're talking about a stam statement, you must define it. If you're talking about an if-then statement, you must define it. Whatever you're doing, as we see in this book, you must clearly define the essential aspect of the subject that you're trying to explain. It has to be very clear so that the person listening to it can understand it. Don't describe mikrim, the non-essential parts of a topic, instead of talking about the essential form of its gather. לא תיקח עניינים המקרים, תחס עצמאים, לגדול בהם ענייניו. כי לא ייתן זה ציר שלם על שייך. It won't give a complete picture. If I'm trying to define a man, then I start talking about, well, a man has, white skin or red skin. That's very nice, but those are mikrim. Men run or they sit down. Men have minds. These are things that men have, but they don't hit the essential point. The essential point is its definition. So you can talk about its klal, what klal he's in. He's in the klal of animals. What distinguishes him from his klal, that he's a medaber and the other animals are not. So that's an essential definition as opposed to segulis, he laughs or he has a certain colored skin. Okay. Gedar. The third thing he's going to talk about is chiluk. You have to divide your subject matter also in a logical way. Hu gam kein iker godol lahakel lelamed hasagas mevukasho ki kol zman she'ein hasechel nasig el klalim ein hasagas shlema. He says it's also an iker godol called the chilukim. In order to teach your concepts that you're trying to get across, because if you're just explaining generalities, you're not going to give a full picture to anybody. In order to get a complete picture, you're going to have to break down the subject into its parts. So the person gets the full picture. And then it will be that you're actually presenting a full picture. Tavchin kolin kol nosecha ve'emes lo pachas v'lo yoter. It gives a couple of warning points. Make sure that the parts that you are dividing your subject into are sufficient. You don't have fewer parts than necessary or greater parts than necessary. Perisho, shelo taniach chelek minosecha asher lo timneu. Don't leave out a part that you're not counting. V'chein lo timnei yoter al ma sheyesh bo be'emes. Also, don't add extraneous pieces too. As we started off the class with our Visio chart, he breaks the study down in studying the sugyas here. Okay, he breaks into three breaks parts: Chelken Masimatan, Pulsa Seichel, and Seder Iyum. And each part he breaks into his subdivisions. Okay, but you have to make sure that you have a sufficient grouping of elements and that you don't have anything less or anything greater than you need. The best way to divide things, break up your subject matter into large generalities. Then toshiv ותסלך כל חלק מחלקיו לחלקים שניים pratim me'ishonim. Then take those large categories and break them down into secondary groups, into the third. And then break the large categories into smaller and smaller units. Try to make the minimum amount of divisions possible, and make more subdivisions. So try to break your things down to the fewest generalizations possible, and within each generalization, then you can have more subdivisions. Perish. Shim tochel, if it's possible, tishtadel lichlol kol nosecha b'shnei chalakim o shlosha. Try to condense your subject into 2 or 3 large categories. V'chein al derech zeh. Okay. Now he's going to give us an example from Yosiyas Shabbos. You asked, how is this going to help us in our learning? So he gives an example from the Mishnah of Shabbos. So in Yosiyas Shabbos, it says, now you also asked whether Yosiyas Shabbos is sichli or maisi. Okay, we have to answer both sorts of questions. Throw it out. You tell me what it is. But this is what he says. Yosiyas Shabbos, shtayim shehen arba b'fnim, v'shtayim shehen arba b'chutz. The going out or carrying out on Shabbos is 2 which are 4 inside and 2 which are 4 outside. That's what the Mishnah says. The Ramchal explains. V'hine kan chilei klal Yetzias HaShabbos l'shnei chalakim. V'hine b'fnim u'b'chutz. Here's Yetzias HaShabbos. So the Mishnah divides Yetzias HaShabbos into 2 large categories, b'fnim and b'chutz. Okay. Now b'fnim and b'chutz, the question is who's b'fnim and b'chutz. So let's look at the Mishnah so we understand a little better what he's talking about. Okay. Here's the Mishnah. It says, Yosiyas Shabbos, Shnayim Shem Ar B'fnim, U'Shnayim Shem Ar B'chutz. It says the carryings out of Shabbos are 2 which are 4 inside and 2 which are 4 outside. Rashi explains that 2 which are 4 inside, La'osan Ha'omdim B'fnim, Shnayim in the Torah. To those that are sitting inside. What B'fnim means, we'll see in 1 second. Ketzad, only omad b'chutz. It's the poor person stands outside and the balabai is b'fnim. And the master of the house is inside. So b'fnim and b'chutz means the person who's in the house, the balabais, and b'chutz is the oni who is outside the house. So you see it's a Shabbos hashnayim Shehen Arba B'fnim, is 2 which are 4 for the Balabayas, who's inside the house, Rishnayim Shehen Arba Chutz, to the Ani, who is outside the house. So now the Mishnah explains itself. So in order to describe the topic of carrying, and again here I think we have our answer. We're not trying to teach you how to do something. We're not trying to teach you how to carry things out. We're trying to give you the intellectual understanding, the conceptual understanding of what the Easter of carrying on Shabbos is. So the Mishnah divides it into 2 parts: the Balabais and the Ani, inside and outside the house. Ketzad. Ha'ani omed b'chutz and the Balabais b'fnim. This, by the way, if you don't look at the Mishnah, you just look at what the Ramchal says, you don't really get the fun point of what he says. So I'm going into the text itself. The Ani stands outside the house, and the Balabais, of course, is inside the house. What happens? Poshet ha'ani. Poshet ha'ani es yado lifnim. The poor person takes his hand and he places it inside the house. He has a basket or something in his hand. V'nosam l'toch yado shel Balabais, and he takes this basket and he puts it in the hand of the Balabais. Ocean, not only toho, but hotzio, or he takes something from the balabaya, some food or whatever, and he brings it out of the house. In that case, the ani is chayav and the balabaya is pater. The ani who has done a akira from the outside, and like he takes the basket from the outside, places it in the house, and puts it down in the, inside the house in the hand of the balabayas. That's a complete act, and he's chayav. And if he does the opposite, if he takes something from the balabayas' hand, and he does the akira in the nach outside, he'll be chayav, and that'll be chayav midaraisa. Whereas the balabayas hasn't done anything; he passively has his hand there, and the ani either took something from his hand or put something in his hand. What is the And so that's that the one who did the act here, in this case, the ani is chayav midaraisa, and balabais is pater completely. What's the opposite deraisa din of the balabais? Pasha balabais has shidol l'chutz. He takes some food and he puts it outside. But also puts him into the hand of the poor person. So he takes the basket of a poor person and he brings it in the house. Then alabayas chayev ani pater. This case, the balabayas did the akira nacha.
You're missing a base there.
Yeah, okay. Ocean adal mitol so hala
balabayas. Supposed to say balabayas. Supposed.
What?
You're missing a base. Supposed to say balabayas chayev. Just put it in base. Right before the al. It's not supposed to be al habayis chayim, it's supposed to be bal habayis chayim.
Oh, yeah, bal habayis. Anyway. Very good. Wow, you know that Mishnah. Okay, bal habayis. Yeah, al habayis. You're right. Bal habayis is chayim and the ani is pater. Okay? So those are the two deraisa dins where either the ani does the akira and the hanacha or the bal habayis does the akira and the hanacha completely. The other one is passive. So those are two that the balabayas of the ani would be chayav deraisa. Here's the last two is where they share the activity. Pasha the ani is yadol lefnein. The poor person places the basket inside the house, but nadol balabayas mitocho, and he doesn't do the hanacha, but the balabayas picks it up and puts it down. Or nasan letocho, or the balabayas picks something up and puts it in the outstretched poor person's hand. Poor person never did the akira, and he takes it out and does the hanacha. In that case, Shneim Paturi. And the last case, the case of the Balabayas, Pasha Balabayas says Yidol L'chutz, he takes the food and he puts it outside. Natal Ani Mitocho, but he doesn't do the hanacha. The Ani takes it on his hand, he puts it down. Oh, Shenasan L'tocho, or the Ani puts his basket in, he does the akira. The Balabayas takes it in and he does the hanacha. In that case, Shneim Paturi, both in Paturi. So the Ramchal wants to say the following. He says, here we see a example of how the Mishnah takes a subject called Yisitza Shabbos, breaks it up into its largest or smallest amount of chalukin, called the Balabayas and the Ani, breaks each one into its subdivisions and each one down into its subdivisions. And this type of organizational chart, okay, is what the Ramchal suggests that we should be doing when we're teaching people how to do how to learn some subject, an intellectual subject. Okay, so let's just get that again now. Now we went through the Mishnah. He says like this, you see a Shav Shnaim Shav B'Rifnim, Shnaim Shav B'Chutz, Hine, Kan, Chile Klal Yitzitza Shabbos L'Shnei Chalokim, L'Hainu B'Fnim B'Chutz. The Mishnah divided the Yitzitza Shabbos into two basic parts, the B'Fnim and the B'Chutz. The inner person, the Balabayas, and the Ani. Then it took the Balabas, for instance, who's inside, and he said there was two activities he does in order to make him chayav from the Torah. Either he does the complete akira hanacha from inside the house out to the poor person, or he does an akira in the poor person's hand, does a hanacha in the house. And then they do the same thing with the ani. He either brings the thing into the house completely by doing a kir in the nachol. He takes something from the balabais out. Okay, so it dividing to b'fnim b'fnim. Achar kach kol echad mishnei chalokim l'shnayim. Then they divided the balabais into two parts. וכל אחד מאלו של שניים אחרים, ונמצא ארבע שהם שתיים, ונמצא ארבע וזהו שתיים שהם ארבע. And then they divided the Balabayas into two parts, where he shares either going in or coming out with the Ani, or the Ani when he puts his hand in or when he puts his hand out, and a Balabayas does the half act. In other words, it took the general cloud, broke it into subcategories and subcategories of subcategories. So that's his example of the Mishnah, and we see that he's using that type of organizational chart throughout his Sefer, and all his Sefer are really built that way, because he's trying to teach people complete concepts. So he takes as few generalities as you can, and then he splits the generalities into their subdivisions. הנה, תזהה בזה להסחלק בהדרגה הראוי ולא תסחיר חלק שנייה עם הראשונים. Make sure when you do this organizational chart that you do not put things which are third level chilukim in the second level. Okay, so you don't want to talk about the Rabbanans before you talk about the deraises. V'lo shlishi yamashniim, and don't put third levels at the second. V'chein kiyotzi b'zeh ela kol davar mekomo madrika. Make sure that everything is in its proper madriga, just like you did with Mesil Sharm and Pinchas ben Yoar. V'yu hachalakim kol echad shona michabaro. Another precaution is that every division has to be different. In that case, we had the rices and rabbanans. The nivdal mimeno be'emes, and it's really separated in truth. Shelo timna inyan echad shtei pamim. Make sure you also don't repeat when you're making your organizational charts, something in level 2 and something in level 3. וזה כלל דרך העיון והסבונס להבין ולהשיא כל מושכל שיהיה לאמיתו. Concludes the Ramchal. This is a categorical discussion of deep investigation and understanding, to understand and to conceive every concept in truth. Hashem yitan chachma, Hashem gives wisdom, mipiv, dasa savuna, knowledge, understanding, tam and ishlam, shevach, lekel borei, olam. Finished, completed, and praise to Hashem. So, that's it. We did it. At least stage 1. Okay,
a
lot of information here.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have to go over it slowly. We have to apply things, and we'll have to take a few classes to do that. The more we apply, the better the tool becomes a usable tool. The problem that I brought up many times is that it's very easy to read the book and to let the chalukim fly by, and then there's a great gap between your actual learning and what the Ramchal has done. So we have to do application. It's the slow way, which is the really fast way in the end, because you actually get the value of the sefer. Okay, so bleeding there we will do next week some applications, and we'll, as Hashem, get the benefit.
I know what time it is and figure out if I'll be done by 10:30. I don't know, so maybe we'll be
okay.
Like
so we'll be flexible.
Right.
We'll be flexible. If not, we'll have to move things over.
like Sunday night or something like that, or a different night.
Yeah, because it is what it is. Hanukkah, Baruch Hashem, is Hanukkah with the family,
Right.
and all that. So keep in touch.
Right. So I keep. Okay. Very good.
Okay, great.
All right. Thank you very much. We'll
Sure.
Okay, very good. Goodbye.